Hey guys, today we are going to be talking about ratios, rates, and proportions. Please feel free to pause these notes and write them down or watch me go through them and then you can write them as we go or you can write it at the end. So this is going to be our next very large topic. We're going to be talking about ratios, rates, and proportions in some form or fashion for the next 4 weeks. So this is the beginning and the definitions, and this is where we're going to start. So a ratio is the first big thing we're going to talk about, and a ratio compares two different things or two similar things. When we talk about this, we also talk about part to whole. You're going to hear me say part to whole quite a bit. There's 3 ways that you can write a ratio. You can use the word to, you can use the colon, or you can use the fraction bar. So when we talk about a ratio, we talk about things that we're trying to compare. So I could say 3 stars to 5 circles. Or I can say 2 cats, and then use the colon, which also means the word to, 2 cats to 1 dog. Or I can write the fraction bar and I could say something like 10 girls and then 2, that fraction bar means 2, to 20 students. So you can write them with similar things or similar units or similar words, or you can write them differently. An equivalent ratio is when we write something and we are trying to make sure that our fractions are equal. Equivalent means equal to. Either they've been increased or they've been decreased, but using the same amount. So when I talk about this, I talk about an equivalent ratio. So if I have like 1/2, I want something that's equal to it. So a higher or an increased amount could be something like 4/8. So equivalent ratios are ratios that are equal to each other. There's 2 ways to tell if an equivalent ratio is true, and you can go ahead and cross multiply, or you can simplify your fractions. So I know that 1/2, if I were to simplify this and I divide by 4 here, this turns into a 1, and if I divide by 4 here, this becomes 2. 1/2 equals 1/2. So you can simplify your fractions, or you could have increased it and said, well, if I times this by 4, that makes 4. If I times this by 4, that makes 8. So 4/8 equals 4/8. So you can increase it, decrease it, finding fractions that are equal to each other. Or, like I said earlier, you can cross multiply. So if I have something like 5/6 equals, let's say 30/36, you could simplify this and say, oh, well, if I divide by 5, I get 6, but I can't divide this by 5. If I divide this by 6, I get 5. If I divide this by 6, I get 6. Or you can cross multiply. And you can say that 6 times 30 makes 180. And you can say 5 times 36 makes 180. And since those 2 numbers are equal, they are equivalent. So you can cross multiply, or you can reduce or increase. So when I talk about rates, this is when we compare 2 quantities with different units. They have to be different. And a unit, remember, is like an hour, a minute, cup, feet, block, yard, miles. All those are units. So when I talk about a rate, I'm comparing 2 things that may not be, or are different units, and may not be similar to each other. So I could say something like, I ran 3 miles in, we'll say, 30 minutes. So 3 miles in 30 minutes. The ratio is 3/30. 3 miles in 30 minutes. Making sure that you try to write your units with this so that way you don't forget. So when you're talking about a rate, you are comparing what you have. I'm going to write over here, write units, because it's very important so you don't get lost, you don't get confused, and you know exactly what it is you're looking for. So I could also say that something like I wrote 100 words in 5 minutes. So the bottom number doesn't always have to be the small. So I would say 100 words. And then you could use those three. You could 2, 5 minutes, or the colon. I generally try to write it as a fraction over 5 minutes. Generally, when we're talking about a rate, we like to put miles on top, and we like to put time on bottom. So money and miles on top, and then time on bottom. Unit rate is when you only have one of something. Your denominator is 1. So whenever we're trying to find a unit rate, generally we divide. Because remember, that fraction bar means to divide. So we're going to divide things in order to try to simplify it. So if I said that I ate 10 cookies in 5 minutes, and I want the unit rate, I want to know how much I'm going to eat in 1 minute. I'm always trying to turn that denominator to 1. So you divide top number inside, bottom number outside. 5 goes into 10 twice. So I will eat 2 cookies in 1 minute. Unit rate is where we're dividing to turn that denominator into 1. So if I said that I did 30 blocks in 3 minutes, once again, I want to know how much for 1 minute. I'm always turning that denominator to 1. So I'm going to divide 30 and 3, top number inside, bottom number outside. 3 goes into 30, 10 times, so 10 blocks in 1 minute. These are very important for you to kind of look at and go through. We are going to be talking about and doing some examples in our next video. We're also going to be taking definitions on proportions. Hopefully this helps you understand a ratio, which is where you're comparing two different or similar things, an equivalent ratio, which is where we talk about fractions that are equal to each other, because remember, a ratio is just a fraction. You can divide when using fractions, and a rate is going to compare two different things, always different things. So when your parents are driving down the road and they go 60 miles per hour, that's actually a unit rate because they're going 60 miles in 1 hour. So a rate is comparing two different things, and a unit rate is where we have a denominator of 1. You always find that using division. So whenever we talk about ratios, rates, and proportions, remember we are working with division here. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and have a good rest of your day.